Kevin, welcome to Everton. How have your first few days been as Director of Football at the club?
Yeah, very busy, but of course very exciting. It's an absolute honour and a privilege to be here. Working for Everton Football Club is something that I'm extremely proud of and looking forward to getting started.
It's such a broad remit, your role, so can you outline roughly what the job entails and your day-to-day responsibilities?
Yeah, so generally the way in which it works is Frank is responsible for preparation of the team, performance of the team and fundamentally results. And I'm responsible for all of the support services that sit around that. So all of the departments that hopefully help us to win. And so trying to get those in a space whereby they're as strong as they possibly can to give Frank the best opportunity to win games and for Everton to be successful is a big part of the remit.
What made the position at Everton so attractive for you?
Well, number one, it's Everton Football Club. And so I've said already how proud and how privileged I feel to be working at such a club. It's a club that I know well. My family's originally from the northwest area. My first ever game was at Everton at Goodison Park, watching. And so the opportunity to come back to the Premier League and work for a club with the tradition and the history and also the ambition of Everton Football Club was something that I just simply couldn't turn down.
And you know the area well, because I believe your parents are from Liverpool and there's plenty of Blues in your family as well.
Yeah, no, both my parents are from the city. My dad's been an Everton supporter for 68 years. Lots of conversations about the traditions and former games that he's been at and so on. So yeah, it's a fantastic feeling to be able to come back to the area and hopefully do a great job.
So you know full well about the club's proud history, obviously, and the passionate fan base as well.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, no, I've grown up with stories of Alex Young, the Golden Vision. I watched all of the games in the 80s. I grew up with Harvey Kendall Ball, the School of Science. Grew up with all of those stories and all of those things. And so I think that I know a lot about the football club. I'm also very lucky to know quite a few people who work at the football club currently. So hopefully that means that settling in and getting started will be a lot easier.
Of course, as well as the club's proud history, it's also very ambitious. The new stadium's being built at the minute. So you're joining at a time that is exciting for the club and we want to push forward and continue to push for the elite and for honours. Yeah,
and I've watched all of the detail around the new stadium and it looks incredible. And so to join a club that's got that level of ambition and is that forward thinking and understands that it needs to evolve and develop into a club that has those sorts of facilities is terrific. And so I'm very much looking forward to being a part of that.
When your position was announced, you said that the owner, the chairman and the CEO gave you compelling reasons to join Everton. So what were they?
Yeah, so I was very lucky through the interview process to have good conversations with Mr. Mashiri, very good conversations with the chairman and also Denise. And I thought they were very, very clear in terms of the vision for the football club, direction of travel, where they were currently and all of the things we needed to do. And that plus the opportunity then to talk to Frank and talk about his vision for the football club. I was left with no doubt that this was going to be the right move for me to make. I'm glad to say I get a very strong feeling about what we can achieve here at Everton Football Club.
And what did the owner, chairman and CEO tell you about the role of director of football, how they see the role entailing?
So number one, it's clear that they recognise there's some work to be done from a football perspective. They recognise that Frank, as the manager, needs some support. And the conversations I've had with Frank so far have been excellent. Very, very clear about what he wants to do and how he wants to do it. And then very, very clear about making sure that we build departments that can support Frank and the football club to be as strong as it possibly can be. And so when we say that nothing but the best is good enough, certainly throughout the conversations that I've had so far, it's clear that that's what the board want to achieve. And so I'm hopeful that we can try and achieve some of those things as quickly as possible.
This is a position where longevity is key to shaping the club, but what are your short-term objectives for now?
Well, it's a good point. So it's without question, it's in the short-term perspective, it's about today. So I think we all recognise the difficulty of the situation that we find ourselves in. So it really is full power to try and support Frank and the coaching team and the players and the heads of department to get us in a better situation than we are currently. But of course, the role is also about protecting tomorrow. So it's very much about performance today, but it's also about looking at the pipeline, the young players, the academy, how we can continue to develop the great tradition that Everton's got in terms of producing and growing its own trees. And then also being very clear about what the identity looks like from a football perspective. So making sure that the fans and the club get to see what they expect to see from an Everton football team. And so working on those 2 or 3 things, performance, pipeline and identity, are going to be a big part of what I do, not only today, but also in terms of tomorrow.
That pipeline, is that a key long-term objective then, in terms of making a structure from the academy and a pathway into the first team, and like you say, almost a strategy of how the teams play?
Yeah, very much so. From my perspective, Everton has always had a fantastic tradition of developing its own players, number one. And why is that so important? It's because those young players, they understand the fabric of the football club. They understand they're part of the DNA. So with that being the case, providing opportunities for young players to progress into the first team, I think is part of the identity of Everton Football Club. And so with that being the case, the academy and the processes that we put in place have to be very, very important and have to be very strong, because we want to be able to give those young players, if they're good enough, the opportunity to play for Everton. And that's going to be a big part of what we're looking to do here. Can
you tell us more about how those initial talks went with the manager?
Yeah, just very, very positive. We've had some good conversations about his initial thoughts about his time here. We're very lucky that we've got offices right next to each other, so I'm hoping that's going to facilitate a good relationship. He's very open, very optimistic, and already you can see from walking around the building the difference that he's already made with him and his coaching staff. There's, despite the circumstances that we find ourselves, there's an air of positivity. And so it will be very much about trying to build a strong relationship with Frank and trying to support him to be successful today. And then hopefully he can support me and the football club to help us to build something for tomorrow and make sure that we're strong and sustained in terms of our approach.
How important is that day-to-day communication with Frank going to be to make sure there is one clear vision that it's joined up and we're approaching the same objectives together?
I think it's absolutely vital. In all of the clubs I've worked with, the relationship with the head coach or the manager, whatever the title might have been, has always been vital to the success of the football department. And there's a reason for that, is because he's responsible for the most important team. And he's also a football expert. You don't appoint and employ somebody like that if he hasn't got football expertise. And so with that being the case, I'll be trying to draw on the expertise and the experiences that he's got and his coaching team have got to really help us to build out and develop the football platform, really.
And so far, it's early days, as you say, with Frank, but he's clearly a modern manager who has shown that he wants Everton to play with, aggressively and on front foot and full of energy. Is that something that matches with what you want to see from an Everton team?
Well, number one, I've watched all of the games so far, and I think it's clear that he's trying to build a very solid identity. And it seems very clear to me that he also understands the club, and he understands the fan base. And I think that's represented in the identity that he's trying to build. And of course, if you look at all of the successful teams, it should be no surprise that the best teams are the ones who've got a very strong identity. In terms of Everton Football Club, I think it's clear what the fan base want, and I think it's clear what the philosophy should be here. I think Frank gets that from what I've seen so far, and hopefully give the fan base something that they're proud of.
You're strategic lead for recruitment, so how do you envisage that operating in practice?
Yeah, well, number one, we've got some shoes to fill. So I've already sat down with the recruitment team and had good conversations with them. We've already had some conversations about what we want it to look like from a recruitment process with Frank. And so in terms of how it works going forwards, it'll be very collaborative. We've got a good department, we've got some good people. And so we're going to harness the expertise that they've got there, and then also get Frank and the coaching team to be heavily involved and heavily included in terms of player search, and then understand how Frank wants to play and how we see the team playing going forwards, and be very clear about what we recruit from this point on, so that hopefully we build a team that's a bit more consistent, a bit more stable, and also is very clear about what their roles and responsibilities are on the pitch.
You say about collaboration, how important is that between you, Frank, the owner, the chairman, the CEO, as you say, so there is everyone's as a joined up thinking in terms of the strategy and the identity of the team?
Yeah, I mean, my perspective on that is, I've got a couple of things on that. Number one, of course, we're stronger together. The more that we communicate and the more that we collaborate, the better we'll be for it. And then the second point is, a house divided against itself can't stand, and what I mean by that is, if people see it, it's okay to see things differently, but at some stage we have to agree about direction of travel, because that generally gets you the best outcome. So working hard to communicate, collaborate, get everybody on the same page, I think is going to be very, very important to the success of this football club going forwards.
And you're only a few days into your job, so it's early to ask this, but in terms of potential transfer targets, does work begin on that from day one that you came through the door?
Yeah, without question. You know, I think everybody understands that recruitment is such an integral piece of this role, as well as the manager's role. But of course, the real focus right at this moment is about supporting Frank and supporting the coaching team to help them to get results, and then work away diligently in the background on what the plan looks like for the summer.
For you, will there be a certain profile of player, do you think, in terms of whether that's age, whether that's hunger, or with players with something to prove? For you, is it important to get a general characteristic?
Well, it's important to get somebody who fits Everton Football Club. I think we all understand what that means. And so I'm sure if I asked any fan in the building, they would be able to say to me the 3, 4, 5 characteristics that are important to be an Everton player. So number one is, of course, it's about getting the player with the right skills, but it's about getting the right person. You know, somebody who's going to fit into what Frank wants to achieve, and then also what the club wants to achieve. So working very, very hard on those two components that are going to be absolutely vital to us going forwards.
You've got a proven track record of building teams. You're an integral part of Wolves' rise from League One to the Premier League, to them qualifying for Europe, and then with New York Red Bulls, I believe you put together the youngest roster in the MLS. So how important is building a squad with character and identity?
Yeah, well, as I said before, identity is very, very important, and it's something that you have to value. I think the clearer that people are in their roles and responsibilities, the better outcome you're going to get on the pitch. And so us being clear about who we are and what we are and how we're going to play is obviously very important, and a lot of those things are a big part of Frank's job. But then it's also important to recognise that as well as that identity piece, you've also got to make sure you get the right fit for people. And so it's not always about, everyone can identify the right players. It's also making sure you can identify the right people as well. And so working on those two elements in particular and getting exactly the right fit for Everton Football Club is going to be fundamental for us going forwards.
Just going back to Wolves, you had enormous success there. And your time at Molineux, you look at the players who were brought in, who are still there, still key part of how they're performing this season as well, and have gone on and done well with other clubs as well. So when you look back, what were the keys to making that work so well?
Well, one, being very clear about what we wanted the team to look like. So working very closely with Nuno and with Foes and the owners to say, okay, what do we think a Wolves team looks like? Number two, understanding what the fan base want the team to look like, because every fan wants to resonate. They want to be able to identify with the people who are representing them on the pitch. And then three, being very clear about what we wanted from each positional profile, and then working away as hard as possible to identify those players and get those players into the system very quickly. We were very lucky at Wolves in that we had a lot of support and a lot of collaboration to try and work together to get the very best outcome. And I think that's very important to make the point that, again, if you're not together, it's going to be very difficult for you to achieve those things. So a big part of my job is going to be about communicating, about collaborating and working together to try and get the very best outcome for Everton Football Club on the pitch.
I was going to ask, do you see the reasons you've outlined there as a key success at Wolves as what's going to be very important to being a success with Everton as well?
Yeah, it is for sure. However, having said that, I don't think it's just as simple as me importing what I did at Wolves or importing what I did at New York Red Bulls. Let's recognise this as Everton Football Club. You know, it's just a fantastic club with a huge tradition and a huge history. So we have to identify with that. We have to pay attention to that and make sure that the policies and the processes and the strategies that we have specifically relate to our situation here. And again, the only way you get to understand those things is by talking to people, communicating and listening, and then understanding and helping to try and build from that point.
We've talked about your important focus on academy. Prior to your role at Wolves, you were academy manager with the club as well, and at Derby, and Director of Youth at Preston. So how much of a focus in this role on producing players from the academy and maintaining and strengthening links is there between the academy and the first team?
Yeah, well, number one, Everton Football Club has always had a fantastic tradition of developing young players. And I've been on the receiving end of that at Wolves many a year, and at Preston, where I've seen some of the fantastic players that have grown through the academy. Of course, what everybody wants, they want that pipeline to be as strong and to continue for as long as possible, for lots of reasons, and we're seeing some very good examples of that at the moment, with Anthony Gordon currently being in the first team in particular. So academy has to be a very, very important part of what we do going forwards. I regard myself as being young at heart, and what I mean by that is my background is in youth development. We've always worked hard. I've always worked hard to give young players opportunities where we can. Because young players can surprise you, and unless you give them that opportunity, then you never know what could happen. And so, of course, it has to be about performance today. We have to build a team that's able to succeed right at this very moment. But if we want to sustain that success, it really has to be developing a pipeline of young players who can come in and support that performance. And so it's a big part of what we're going to do. It's
the million-dollar question, but for you, how do you try to create that pathway from the academy to the first team?
Well, number one, it's been very clear about what the vision is. So what can sometimes get lost in certain situations is people lose some direction about what they're trying to achieve. And so I think first things first, it's about us being very clear about what we want to try and achieve as a football club. And then for all of the heads of the department to understand how they play their part in it. And then, of course, it's about doing 2 or 3 things down, supporting David Unsworth and the other coaching teams, the other coaching staff down there to do 2 or 3 things. They're obviously working very hard on a high level of contact with the players, a high level of feedback and a high level of support to give the players the tools to do the job effectively. But all of that can be rendered useless if you don't create opportunity. And so what we need to try and maintain, as has always been the case here, is this opportunity for these young players to gain experience, to train with the first team coaching staff to get to know the players and build those relationships so the young players are better for it. And so making sure those pathways are open is going to be vital.
You mentioned David Unsworth, our Director of Academy there. So how important is it for you to work with him regularly, and do you want to see, is it an identity from all the youth teams that they're playing a certain way? Is that important for you?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and we talked a little bit already about identity and how important it is. We should harness that. And I know the academy team with David have been working very, very hard on a coaching philosophy, very, very hard on that identity to make sure that all of the age groups understand what it means to play for Everton and how we want to play the game. And so with that being the case, working closely with David and John Ebrell and all of the guys down at the academy is going to be very important. Me getting to know not only the first team players, but also the players throughout the pathway, I think is a very, very important part of the job, because when we start to talk about recruitment, the first thing that anybody should do in this role is to start to look internally. What have we got in the building? And because those players understand Everton, they're part of Everton. So we must look internally first before we even start to think about the marketplace. So that's going to be a big part of the job, and I'm very much looking forward to working with them guys.
We said at the start of the interview just how broad your remit is then. So not only the recruitment and the academy side of things, but for you there's overseeing sports science, medical services, analysis. So how do you envisage bringing all those elements together and making sure, as we say, it's all collaborative?
Well, number one, we've got some very good people here, and we're very well organised, very well structured, and I've already recognised what a huge club this is and how lucky I am to work here. And so it'll be trying to work with that expertise, really. Again, it'll be about us talking a lot about direction of travel, talking a lot about what best looks like, and understanding where we are against the standard, and then using that expertise, using that experience that we've got in the building to try and fill that gap, to make sure we're as strong as possible, to give Frank and the teams the very best opportunity to be successful.
You're just excited now to get stuck into your role and help take the club forward.
Yeah, very much so, yeah. I feel very lucky to be here, very privileged, as I've said, and literally just can't wait to get going. It feels like it's everything people said it would be, in a very positive way. And so, I'm very much looking forward to being part of the team, very much looking forward to helping Everton Football Club be successful again.